皆さん、こんにちは。ではなくて、こんばんは。31歳でファイヤーしたゴリボーフィアスです。ということで、本日も来ました。FRB、パウジーの国会証言ですかね。はい。こちらなんですけれども、今始まっておりまして、見てください。このね、パウジーの右後ろにいる人、ね、この人、左後ろか。これちょっと国会でノースリーブって OK 牧場なのかどうなのか。ね、これさ、ちょっとさ、わざとやってるのかわかんないよね、ちょっと。うん。っていうところなんですけれども、始めていきたいなと思います。ということで、昨日に続いてね、同じテンプレのメッセージを話した後の質疑応答をね、解説していきたいなと思いますが、マトリックスでいいね、赤いパツキンのね、美女が街を歩いた時にみんな振り向くみたいなね、そんな感じで、これさ、完全にさ、カメラでさ、撮られるの分かってるよね、パウジーのすぐ後ろにいるんだから。それでちょっとノースリーブはどうなのかな、しかもピチピチじゃないですか。うん、これどうなのかなって思うんだよね、これ。うん、これ一攫千金を狙ってるのかな、レピュテーションとして。わかんないけど。
The current economic situation before turning to monetary policy. Inflation remains well above our year, but still robust. Improvements in labor market conditions have been widespread, including for workers at the lower
この辺
end
は
of
昨日
the
と
social
同じことです
has
ね。
been adapting.
で、質疑応答が始まるここからですね。
Could be right. It could also just be, though, the demand is incredibly strong and that, they're raising prices because they can, quote unquote. We're all seeing and feeling the effects of inflation on consumer pocketbooks, but corporate profit margins are not hurting. In 2021, the profit margins of the S&P 500 index surpassed 12%, the highest profit margin on record, and is expected to be even higher in 2020. Corporate greed and consolidation are driving higher and higher prices for consumers above and beyond any inflationary pressures. Just last quarter, Tyson Foods, which sells 1 out of every 5 pounds of meat sold in the United States, claimed that their higher prices are due to rising labor and freight costs. Yet, they still managed to net an additional $500 million in quarterly profits. When it comes to rents, a corporate landlord recently remarked, and I quote, "We have an unprecedented opportunity to really press rents on renewals because the country is highly occupied. And so, where are people going to go? They can't go anywhere."
はい、この人がね、質問しているのは、このミス・ウォーターズという人がチェアウォーマンですけども、この人が質問しているのは、インフレでサプライチェーンがね、ショックで物価、物ね、食品の値段が上がってると。で、上がってる状態なんだけども、その食品の会社がね、利益がかなり上がったんだよねって話をしてて、こんだけインフレで庶民がね、苦しくなってる状態なのになぜ会社の利益が爆増してるのかいと。つまり会社がね、プロフィットマージンね、つまり利上げをして、利益もね、上げられるぐらい利上げをし、価格を上昇させたことで、利益がね、こんなにね、インフレの状態でも上がってんじゃないの。これは大企業のね、強欲、つまりグリードって言ってんだけども、コーポレートグリード。こうね、庶民が困ってる時に会社はね、なんて言うんだ利益を出すためにめちゃめちゃ強欲になってないかということをパウちゃんに聞いてるんですよ。これパウちゃん関係ないよね。だって資本主義の会社ではさ、ね、会社アップルとかさ、テスラとか値上げしてるよね。テスラも値上げしてるしさ、アップルも値上げしてるし。それはだって、物流とかさ、ね、コストがかさんでるから、それはね、消費者にね、しわ寄せが来てるわけじゃん。それはしょうがないわけよね。でそれをさ、コーポレートグリードってね、会社の強欲っていうのはおかしいなと思うんだけど、それはパウちゃん言ってるけど、パウちゃんはね、それは知らんでしょっていうふうに答えなんだよね。
We have a tremendous opportunity to press both on renewing leases for existing residents and to reset market rates, which we've reset numerous times, even this year, end of quote. This kind of blatant profiteering on the backs of hardworking families is simply outrageous. Could you elaborate on the role that corporations play in setting prices and how that is affecting inflationary pressures today? Would you also elaborate on what you meant?
It is clear that the concentration. Sure. So,
そしてパウちゃんの答え。
matters of concentration in the economy represent a series of interesting questions that are largely not settled. For one thing, it is clear that our economy has become more concentrated, largely due to lower levels of formation of smaller businesses. That has happened. It is not at all clear that there's a connection between a more concentrated economy and, for example, inflation. And of course, matters of corporate concentration are outside the jurisdiction of the Fed. Those are for the competition.
今ね、その談合じゃないけどもさ、日本でもあるよね、銀行系とかが、少ない数の会社、でっかい会社にね、どんどん数が少なくなっていると。それはしょうがね、でっかい会社が、合併とかしてね、つまりそれで、なんていうんだ、そういうの、 独占法みたいな、独禁法みたいに引っかかるぐらい、ね、一つの会社がでかくなっちゃって、で、それらがね、プライシングをね、変えられて、利益を得るために価格を釣り上げることができる。
Competition authorities and really not for us to discuss. In terms of why prices are going up, I think a lot of it has been a lot of the places where prices have gone up quite a bit have been situations where supply is constrained and demand is very strong. And so take cars, for example. Demand for cars went up a great deal. During the pandemic, people wanted to ride in cars rather than public transportation, and they wanted to move to the suburbs and things like that. Rates were low. The economy was stronger than people expected. But the companies couldn't really make more cars because they couldn't raise their output because of the lack of semiconductors. So when demand hits fixed supply, what happens is prices go up and margins went up. And so I think as the economy...
で、今はそのね、サプライがね、供給、車のね、新しい車をね、製造することはできなかった。でも、ディマンドは高かったので、値段が上がったというところを話します。これは去年のことだけどね。
Turns to normal, we would expect those profit margins to return to more normal levels.
Well, Chairman Powell, the example that I gave of Tyson, who said their prices were rising because of labor and freight costs, and yet they managed to net an additional $500 million quarterly profits.
I apologize. I'm having a hard time hearing your words. I'm sorry.
パウちゃん、あなたの声なかなか聞こえないよと。マスクしてるから聞こえないってことだと思う。
Okay, the example that I gave of Tyson Foods.
タイソンフードってところが多分ね、価格を上昇させて、で、それで利益もね、このインフレの状態でもね、かなり増やしたという、それを強欲と言ってるんですけど、
And the fact that they said that
それをパウちゃんに言ってもしょうがない。
their prices were rising due to labor and freight costs, yet they managed to net.
だから労働のコストも上がるし、もともとね、食品のコストも上がってるのに、それでも利益がね、かなり増えてると。コストが上がってるのに利益も増えてるってことは、価格をそれ以上に上げてるからだよね。
An additional $500 million in quarterly profits. How do you?
half a billion in quarterly profit ということで、half a billion。だから1ビリオン1000億円ね、500億円。500億円以上の利益を、四半期だけで増やしたと。四半期でですよ。
Explain that.
で、それはね、これどうやって説明するのパウちゃんって聞いてるやんです。パウちゃんのね、答えをね、いや、それは知らないよねって答えるんだ。
I'm not familiar with their profit and loss statement, but
I'm not familiar with the profit and loss statement ということで、利益と損失とね、なんていうんだ、そういう決算の情報とかっていうのはよくね、知らないっていうふうにパウちゃんが言ってね、まあ、パウちゃんの
again, there may be particular industries where there are competition issues. I don't know that. It's really not our focus or our authority.
で、まあ、そうね、食品のあれとかね、別に私、FRB のね、フォーカスではないと。そうですよね。
Do you have the opportunity to look at rising costs and identify corporations where they are gaining substantial profits, yet they keep raising their prices? Do you have a way of examining that?
で、今すみませんね、あなた FRB は、ね、いろんな会社をリストアップして、ね、レイバーコストとか上がってるけれども、利益もね、増えてる会社をね、あなたはリストアップしてますかと。しないでしょ、FRB を。
I think we can see that, but I think our job is to keep maximum employment and price stability.
そう。FRB の仕事は、ね、雇用の最大化と物価の安定だから、それ関係ないよねって話だよね。だからなんでさっきのもそうだけどさ、全く FRB の管轄外のことをさ、パウチェにさ、なんて言うんだろう、責任っていうのかな、転嫁みたいな感じで、こうやってさ、ね、なんて言うんだろう、罪をふっかけようとしてんだろうね。
So we're not in the business of regulating individual companies or determining whether they're...
だからね、FRB がさ、例えばさ、この会社ね、これ以上値上げしちゃダメよとかって、そういうふうに言う権力もないよね。
actions, for example, or anti-competitive or that sort of thing. That's more for elected people and also for the competition authorities. So we do look at that. But again, I think a great deal of the price increases that you saw were a matter of supply being unable to meet demand, and the result was prices moving up. In many cases, that was the story.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, who's the ranking member of the committee, is now recognized.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I would, on this debate about corporate profits, I would commend to the committee Secretary Yellen's statement where she rejects the idea of corporate greed is to blame for inflation, and I concur. We have a complex set of issues. The fiscal house was certainly different than monetary policy. And the extraordinary nature of the partisan American Rescue Plan, the $2 trillion injected into a recovering economy, and Democrat policies to keep people out of the workforce for longer than the rest of the Western world also contributed to inflation. So that is a political debate here on Capitol Hill, Chairman Powell, and that is on the political side. What I want to ask you about are the policy tools that you are using. Now, certainly you, as chair of the Fed and the Open Markets Committee, took extraordinary measures in the midst of the pandemic to ensure that we didn't have further contagion, including extraordinary lending facilities, purchasing securities, keeping the federal funds rate at zero. These were the right tools at the right time. On the fiscal side, you got to partner with bipartisan bills to keep our economy afloat during government shutdowns. But like all good firefighting measures, we should put them away when times change. I want to talk to you as you put these measures away, how you expect the economy to respond. So let's start here. What is your level of commitment to fight inflation?
What is the level of commitment to fight inflation? どのくらいあなたはね、インフレ退治にコミットしますかと。いや、それは昨日言ったよ。何でもかんでもしてね、インフレ退治するって言ったよね、昨日。何なんだろう、こういうリダンダントな繰り返しの質問。
It's unconditional, our commitment, isn't it?
It's unconditional. Unconditional commitment. つまり、無条件。つまり、何が何でも、インフレ退治するよって意味でね、無条件。どんなことが起きても、 対峙するよっていうぐらいのコミットメントだよね。
The reason is that we need to, in a particular situation, we have a labor market that's sort of unsustainably hot, and we're very far from our inflation target. We really need to restore price stability, get inflation back down to 2%, because without that, we're not going to be able to have a sustained period of maximum employment, where the benefits are spread very widely and where people's wages aren't being eaten up by inflation. Really, it's something that we need to do, we must do. In order to have that kind of labor market, we'll need to do it.
So as you pull back these emergency measures from COVID and you normalize rates to what they look like sort of in the long run, how do you expect the economy to respond?
So when we raise interest rates, and also to a lesser extent when the balance sheet shrinks, what happens is rates go up across the economy and financial conditions generally tighten. And you can think of it as in interest-sensitive spending is an important place that will be affected, and that's things like automobiles and other durable goods. If rates are higher, then demand for cars will moderate, will decline a bit. The second channel would be asset prices generally. We don't target any particular asset prices, but higher interest rates tend to bring them down broadly. That tends to mean a little bit less spending because people's wealth has perhaps declined a little bit. And the third channel can be the exchange rate, where it also has disinflation effects. So overall, we have these effects on the economy. Our intent, of course, is to bring inflation down to 2% while preserving a strong labor market. As I've mentioned, that has become significantly more challenging with the events of the past few months, particularly the war, which is driving gas prices up and raising energy prices and also food prices and disrupting supply chains further.
So at the same time, you have a massive balance sheet. First begin with mortgage-backed securities. As we have a roll-off of the Fed's balance sheet of mortgage-backed securities, what are your expectations for how that affects housing?
So I think what will affect housing is the housing industry and market are slowing down from a very, very hot pace, and that's partially because of higher mortgage rates. The effects of
で、インタレストレートを上げてインフレ退治することがどのように経済に影響を与えますかと聞いたときに、まあね、モーゲージとかはね、やっぱ上がっちゃうよねってことで、ハウジング、住宅のね、販売数も下がるでしょうっていう話もしてるし、まあ、そうだな。
shrinking the balance sheet will be marginal compared to the effects that we're seeing and expect to continue to see from rates rising mortgage rates.
But what are your expectations and any further announcements? Can we expect further announcements on the assets you hold and securities you hold? Are there going to be balance sheet announcements in the coming weeks?
No, so I would say this: we have a plan. We've articulated it. The markets are forward-looking. They see it, and the markets are in a good place. I think understanding what we're going to do, and that's we're going to be allowing these securities to mature and run off our balance sheet at a pace that we've said. And it'll be 90 or 95 billion, I guess, by September. Now it's about half of that. So that's what we've done, and we expect. The idea is that that'll just be on an ongoing basis in the background, and we think the markets can handle that. Treasury will then reissue them in whatever form they think is appropriate when it relates to treasuries. So
thank you.
9月までに75ビリオンって言ってたかな。これ1ヶ月で95ビリオンなのか、9月まででトータルで95ビリオンなのかわかんないけども、95ビリオン大体10兆円だよね。10ビリオンが1兆円なんでね。だから9兆円、10兆円ぐらいのね、セキュリティがね、つまりモーゲージバックドセキュリティってやつと、国債両方さ、FRB で買ってたんだけども、それをね、ロールオーバーせずにね、期限切れて、それで失っていくっていうのかな。国債バランスシートを減らしていくっていうやり方が、9月までに10兆円ぐらい減らしていくと。で、それもマーケットにコミュニケートもしてるから、まあ問題なくやっていくでしょうっていう感じで言ってましたね。
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, who is also the chair of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, it's good to see you. And I know you'll hear a lot of probably political stuff going back and forth. But the American public is trying to understand the language of which we're talking today so that we can really understand what inflation is. The fact of the matter is, I just recently was over in Europe. There's inflation in Europe, just like there's inflation here. Although, as I talked to Christine Lagarde and others, they say the cause of the inflation may be different. So the causes are different. They say that maybe demand here, but not a case of demand there. Is to resolve inflation in Europe. For example, I was in Moldova, 30% inflation rate, gas $15 a gallon. Turkey, 80% inflation rate, gas $13 a gallon. And I could name places in Europe, from Europe to the United States. Is it that we had, whether it was the supply chains, the China shutdown, complete shutdown, the zero COVID policy, Russia's war in Ukraine, COVID period, is it just like a massive storm of everything is what contributes to inflation and causes it all over the world?
pretty much, that's pretty
It's a little bit of everything, right? So if I'm talking Russia's war in Ukraine, COVID period, is it just like a massive storm of everything is what contributes to inflation and causes it all over the world?
pretty much.
質問でね、ヨーロッパとアメリカでインフレのね、理由が違ってるっていうふうに言ってて、そういう理解だけども、結局だからCOVIDとかね、ウクライナ侵攻とかそういうね、いろんなね、想定しなかったことが一緒になって、まあ世界的にインフレ起きてるってことで理解合ってるよねって聞いてるんだよね。まあそうだろうっていうふうに。
Much. That's pretty
It's a little bit of everything, right? So if I'm talking to my constituents, trying to explain to them what inflation is and what causes it, I would not single out any one thing. I would probably have to talk about the conglomerate of things, because if you take away 2 or 3 of those, we might not be in a situation here. All of it unprecedented, all of it really out of the control of anyone. Out of control of Democrats, out of control of Republicans, out of control of the president, out of control of other governments. Is that not correct?
Some of it is out of our control. For example, the price of oil and most of the price of food. And to your point, Europe has much more about energy and food prices. Very difficult problems. And also, they of course have the European Central Bank has different countries, which and so they have to worry about the difference, the spreads between different countries, and that's a different challenge that we don't have here. We have the difference here for us is we actually have a very strong economy and well-recovered economy, and so more of our inflation is from demand, and we do have tools to deal with demand. That is the place where we actually can work, and that's what we're using our tools.
And some of that was because during the crises that we had to do certain.
なるほど。アメリカのインフレとヨーロッパのインフレの違いとして特にね、挙げたのが、アメリカ側はディマンドがかなり強い、経済が強い側、つまり、まあ、サプライチェーンの問題もあるんだけども、それよりも需要が高くて物価が上がっちゃったと。ヨーロッパの場合はもう少し弱い感じなので、経済がね。で、かつサプライチェーンのところがかなり影響を与えられていると。つまり、 例えばガスとかオイルとかね、そのサプライがシャットダウン、シャットアウト、ロシアからしてるので、そのサプライがなくなってるから、インフレになってる方が、需要が高くて上がってるアメリカよりはそっち側なんじゃないかという違いがあるっていうふうに言ってる。
certain things, stimulus and other things to make sure that we kept our economy stable. I mean, without doing those things, we would have been in trouble. So the things that we did, going through COVID, the stimulus, trying to make sure people kept their jobs, kept money coming in at the time, was what we had to do. Otherwise, we would have been in worse shape or not have as strong economies we have now compared to other countries. Is that not correct?
Yes, I would say it this way, that our inflation is a consequence of very strong demand, in part driven by supply, by what Congress did to support activity, in part driven by what we did, but also...
But that helped stabilize our economy at that time, right?
It did.
And if we did not do those things, our economy may not be as strong as it is right now.
I think that's right.
That's
So
correct.
our economy is strong.
And let me jump to something else real quick, because the one...
で、なぜね、需要が高くなったかというと、FRB の管轄外だけども、ジョー・バイデンの政権がスティムラスチェックでね、現金パラマキ政策やったからこそ、キャッシュがたくさんありまって、で、需要が高くなったと。それによって物価の上昇ね、なったんでしょっていう話をして、で結局そのスティムラスチェックとかがなかったら、ここまで需要高くなってないよねって言って、そう確認をして、パウチャーうんって言って、でも今現在もね、スティムラス終わったけども、まだ経済が強い状況、つまり需要が高い状況っていうふうに言ってる。
One other thing, I know you testified before the Senate yesterday, but concerned a number of my constituents that I talked to, was the question about can we resolve inflation without increasing unemployment? Because our folks are concerned about losing.
だから昨日の話では、レセッションを起こさずに、かつ、不況率じゃなくなんていうの、それ失業率を上げずにインフレ対応できますかっていうときに、インフレを起こさずにやるのはかなりチャレンジングだけども、できなくもない。ただ、外的要因によると、どのぐらいね、サプライチェーンの問題とかね、ウクライナ侵攻がね、続くかによるっていうことだよね。で今の質問は、失業率を上げずにインフレ対峙できますかという質問。
Losing their jobs and not being able to, it'd be worse if they were unemployed. So my question to you is, can you speak to what the Fed has seen during the last few years with respect to the relationship between unemployment and inflation? And is it possible that we can continue to have a strong labor market while also curbing inflation?
It's certainly possible that we can. And there is a relationship
確かにそれは可能であるっていうふうに答えたね、今。
between unemployment and inflation. The challenge now is that inflation is at a 4-decade high, and some of it we can deal with. Some of it is really going to be dealt with on global markets, the price of oil and that kind of thing. We can't affect those. But the challenge is we're tightening monetary policy, and that's designed to drive growth down to a level that's more sustainable.
で、確かにそれは可能な、失業率をね、あんまり上げずにインフレ対応することは可能なんだけども、やっぱり、コンティテイティブタイトニング、つまり量的ね、引き締めをするっていうことは、グロース、経済の成長を少しね、抑えることになるから、多少ね、失業率が上がるっていう可能性もあるっていうふうには言うんだと思うね。
Sustainable and lower, give the supply side a chance to catch up and give inflation a chance to come down and bring inflation down. That's what we're trying to do. We don't have precision tools, and we raise and lower interest rates. It affects the whole economy through many channels, and so there is a risk that unemployment would move up from what is a historically low level. Though a labor market with 4.1% or 4.3% unemployment is still a very strong labor market. Today's rate is 3.6%, and there are 2 vacancies for every unemployed person. So that's a labor market that's kind of overheated.
で、歴史的にはね、失業率大体 4.1% とかね、4.6% だったんだけど、今現在はね、3.6% で、歴史的に見ても、失業率が過去最低レベルぐらいに低いんだよね。それだけ雇用の状況がね、マーケットが強いと。つまりそれだけ募集してるけども、なかなかね、仕事がね、仕事したいって人が見つからないので、失業率もね、全然低いと。なので、レイバーマーケットは強いから、大丈夫なんじゃないかなっていうね。で、質問
The gentlewoman from Missouri, Mrs. Wagner, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Chair Powell, thank you for joining us again today. I just want to start by saying how sick and tired I am of the president's inflation blame game. One day it's Putin's fault, another it's the oil companies and the meat packers, or perhaps it's corporate greed. Now we're blaming other countries like Estonia, Turkey, Europe. I give you my avid assurance that no one in Missouri's 2nd Congressional District gives a rip what the price of gas and groceries are in Europe. They care about what they are at the corner of Manchester Road and Weidman. No one in this administration is willing to accept responsibility for the dismal economic situation America is in today. Inflation, sir, more than tripled in 2021, from 1.4 to 7%. And from June to the end of September 2021, inflation hovered, I think, around 5.4%, and then began a steady increase.
ね、バイデン政権がインフレーションの責任を取らないで、ね、責任転嫁をしてることにね、このね、ワグナーって人はね、sick and tired とでも、ね、本当にもう嫌になってくるぐらいね、政権がそれ、インフレをね、他の人にね、責任を押し付けてるけども、っていうふうに言って、パウチャンでちゃんと答えてるんだよね。インフレのね、原因としては、サプライサイドとディマンドのあれがいろいろあってさ、いろんなことが起きててっていう、その中の一つとしてスティムラスチェックをね、現金をばらまきすぎたっていうのもあるっていうのは認めてるんだけども、バイデンは認めてないんだよね。
Until reaching an historic 8.6% that is now crippling American spending power today. Chair Powell, when inflation remained steady at 5.4% during that period in 2021, what factors played into the Fed's decision to keep rates at nearly zero during each FOMC meeting in June, in July?
で、2021年にね、インフレがちょっとずつ上がってきたときに、その時パウチャンはインフレをね、 トランジトリー、つまり短期的、一時的だっていうふうに言ってて、利上げをしなかったわけよね。超低金利政策2021年続いたわけよ。インフレがしてたけど。じゃあ、なんざの時にね、インフレが来た時に、利上げしなかったんだいっていうね、この問いただす質問をしてるんだけども、パウチャーの答えはおそらくね、その時は一時的だっただろうっていうふうに、その時の判断では一時的だったと思ったからっていうふうに答えるしかないと思うんだよね。
And in September of 2021, sir.
So during the summer of 2021, just giving us hindsight, inflation was coming down month by month. If you look at monthly readings for CPI or PCE, they were coming down month on month through September. And so that I think, told us that our thesis that this was going to be a passing inflation shock.
はい、言ったね、passing が、inflation was passing by ということで、その時ね、1ヶ月ごとのマンスリー、オーバーマンスリーのインフレーションは、その時ちょっと確か下がってたっていうふうにね、今解雇していて、だからその時は一時的だと思ったっていうふうに言ってるんだね。
Was at least plausible. I think that the data turned pretty hard in October and November, and we very much changed our position.
で、2021年の10月、11月からね、一気にね、上がってきたっていうふうに言ってて、それまでは本当に一時的だっただろうっていうふうなデータに基づいた判断をしたっていうふうに言い訳じゃないけど、理由付けしてる。
And since then, I've tightened financial conditions quite significantly. So it was a matter of a few months when we were really looking at this and thinking it's going to be passing. Most macroeconomists thought that it would be a passing thing. It turned out to not have been so far. And so,
But we saw it move from 1.4% to 5.4%. So I don't, did have a steady period of time. I wouldn't say that it was declining, but I'm just surprised that we weren't moving more quickly at the Fed. I mean, I'm going to be honest, sir, that the Fed I think underestimated actual inflation. What do you think you missed?
で、それに対してね、あなたはね、インフレーションをアンダーエスティメイトしてるんじゃない、過小評価しててね、対応遅かったんじゃないのっていうふうに責めたいんだよ。
well, we did underestimate it. With the benefit of hindsight, clearly we did.
で、パウチャーの答えは、はい、そうです。私は過小評価してましたっていうふうに認めてますよ。
It comes down to this judgment that we had to make. It has really nothing to do with our framework or anything like that.
ただね、その時ってまだウクライナ侵攻とかさ、中国のゼロコビットポリシー起きてないよね。それが起こるって分かってない状態で、インフレ落ちてくるだろうって予測してたから、利上げしなかったんだね。で、結局起きちゃったんだよね。2022年の2月26日にさ、そういうね、期待予想だにしないことが起きて、その後4月だっけ2月、3月も。
Looking at the supply chain problems and the shock to labor force participation, millions of people out of the labor force, we had to decide whether that was going to be a lasting thing or whether it would kind of turn around quickly. We had very high levels of labor force participation. Suddenly they're much lower. The thought was people will come back. As soon as COVID is over, we have these new vaccines. Every American's going to get vaccinated. We'll be done with COVID by the end of the year. So basically, these supply side issues, broadly speaking, just didn't get better. There were recurring waves, and that was the judgment we had to make. We knew it could be wrong. I think when it started to look pretty wrong, we pivoted.
Now, President Biden continues.
7 months ago.
President Biden continues to say that a recession is not inevitable, as his government agencies, and Dems in Congress continue to spend billions and trillions of taxpayer dollars, burden businesses with costly rules and regulations, and on top of it, the president refuses to unleash American energy independence. The president's policy continue to take inflation-taming options, I think, off the table and hamstring the Fed's ability to focus on price stability.
はい、ということで、今現在、テスラ、ね、これ何だったんだろうね。マーケットオープンでがっつり落ちたのかな、一瞬。落ちたね。落ちて、680まで落ちてから今戻してる状態で、今700ドルぐらいでね、回ってる状態だよね。で、それ以外はね、上がってるんだよね。SP500 でもね、微増。まだこれ、ブルトラでお尻ペンペンがお尻から上がってるんじゃないかなと思うんだよね。で、石油が下がってるんだよね、これ。おもろなのかわかんないけど、なんで下がってんだろうね。どうして下がった、これから夏、まだね、夏来てないから、これから上がる可能性もなくはないよね。で、Apple とか Google とかは上がってる状態。ね。これもブルトラなんじゃないかなと思うんですよね。Apple、Google、その他もろもろね、上がってて。そしてビットコインがどうなるどっちなんだいっていうね。まだまだ、上がったのか下がったのかどっちなんだいっていうね。判断難しいよね、この状態。この50日のところをね、こうやって上がってきたようだけどまたね、落ちそうで。だからこれ、あれだよね。横ばいのレンジだよね、結局。だから、この下側に行くのか、上側に行くのか、どっちにもわかんない状態。ただグラグラしてるんだと思います。ということで、ね、グローバルインフレーションレート、カナダ 7.7、アメリカ 8.6、イギリス 9.1、ブラジル11、アルゼンチン 60%、ベネズエラ 167% ということでね、アメリカよりヨーロッパの方がひどいんだよね、インフレが。そして、バイナンスがね、アメリカの SEC からだと思うんだけども、調査入っちゃってるんだよね。だこれによっては、ユーザーになるかもしれないしね、could end up indicted or become the richest man in the world とかで、もし無罪になった場合には、一番ね、世界で金持ちになるかもしれないと。で、これですけども、in bear market, all bullish patterns are clearly trapped. We all know that ということで、これね、ヘッド&ショルダーパターンのインバース版だよね。これ SP500 だと思うんだけども、インバースのヘッド&ショルダーだと思うんだよね、これ。多分、そうだな。1、2、3。これ SP500 か わからんけど。これビットコインか。ビットコインが、これは、ね、そうだよな。これ見てみると、肩。で、これが頭。で、こうなって、で、この分ね、この高さ分上がるんじゃないっていう風なパターンなんだけども、これがね、ブルトラになるんじゃないかと、ベアトレンドでは。っていうことのツイートです。まあ、どっちに動くかわからんけども、まあ、中期的に見たらね、落ちてくれるんじゃないかなと私は思ってるので、そんな感じです。そして、今日のね、パウちゃんのスピーチ以外は、何か重要な指標はあるのか、どうなのか、今、パウちゃんのテスモニーであって、それ以外今日はないね。で、明日金曜だから、金曜は特にないんじゃないかな。ミシガンコンスーマーセンティメントが来るね。ミシガンコンスーマーセンティメント。これ毎週やるんだよね、確か。まあ、そんな感じでね。今週は下がらないのかもね。今週はブルトラのね、週なのかもわかりませんよ。そんな感じで。ビットコインに関しては完全にレンジだよね。落ちもせず、上がりもせず。まあ、そういうね、日もあるでしょう。はい。ということで、コメントですね。こんばんは。本日もよろしくお願いします。タンクトップ、前後逆じゃねということで。ナースがミニスカなトレンディードラマじゃないですから。ノースリーブいいですね。日本人ってよくさ、すぐあれだよね。なんでもない服でもさ、日本人でもさ、芸能人がさ、なんか派手なとかさ、大胆なとかっていう風にさ、ネット記事上がるけど、あれ大胆でもなんでもないよね。ノースリーブで大胆なとかって言ってるけど、そうじゃないよ。お疲れ様です。スマッシュ。スマッシュしたいですね。いや、どういう意味だ。このスマッシュ。一応トゥルー。こんばんは。今日も拝見します。一応トゥルー。こんばんは。ライブ翻訳ありがとうございます。ということでね、どういたしまして。ということで、皆さんの仕事は何か分かってますか？皆さんの託された役割というのは、グッドボタンをスマッシュブラザーズすることです。ね。まあ、62ですから、半分の110ぐらいまで打ち上げていただきたいなと思ってます。ということで、本日はこの辺ですかね。明日、ね、終わって、土日でもしかしたら動くのかもわかんないけども、ビットコインとりあえずね、どっちでもない感じね、どっちなんだいっていうね、レンジに入ってます。これで1週間ぐらい続くかもわかりません。で、なぜかテスラだけちょっと落ちて始まったけどね、それがみんなブルトラのね、週で始まってます。ショッピファイなんてはい。今は買いたくないね。ということで、Google とかも上がって、SP もね、だから今ね、BIX が落ちてんだよね。これパーシー砲なのかな？パーシー砲が逆に動いて、ブルトラを作ってんだね。パウちゃんが喋るとブルトラ来るんだよね。それは今日の最初の動画でも言ったよね。確か、これデイリーチャートだったっけな？確か。ウィークリーチャートだったかわかんないけどさ、FOMC の後ね。ということで、皆さん、とりあえず今はね、ただただ、